Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields, and I got a returning guest, Dr. Joe Simon. He is the CEO of 3DM Diagnostics. He is also an owner/investor in many PT clinics. And like I said, he's been on the podcast before, so thanks again for joining me today, Joe.
Hey, Nathan, it's great seeing you again. And again, my screen is still blinking from the updates, but it's great seeing you again. Great being back and chatting with you and catching up with the group.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think last time we spoke was sometime after the pandemic started, maybe a year and a half ago. And at the time, we were talking about marketing, especially in the environment that we were in at the time. Tell me a little bit, we'll bring the listeners and myself up to speed on what you've been doing, maybe a little bit of background on your professional career for those who haven't listened to you in the past.
Okay, so we'll start all the way in the past and say, practicing physical therapist for about 20 years, right? So I've been a business owner for more than 15 years, active investor and partner in multiple physical therapy practices and other, healthcare providers as well, other practices as well. Pandemic was something different, right? I mean, and one more thing, I've been coaching and consulting and marketing since 2012. Took a break on all of that in about 2018 because I said, you know what, I started investing more in private practices, so I took a break on the consulting side, and I said, you know what, let's take a break from that. Like I said, the pandemic was something so different. We chatted, like you said, like a year and a half ago, and said, how are we handling this now? And a lot of it was just pivots. We were trying to, deal with the environment, what was going on. And again, 2020, Monday morning quarterback, a 2020 vision, as we say, we look back now and we say, wow, what could I have done differently? Did anyone really have it right? Was laying off all your staff the right move? Was keeping all your staff the right move? Was, switching to virtual treatments? Was that the right move? Was seeing people and not caring what the mandate was the right move, right? So there was so many different things that I talked to people about in different parts of the country, and different parts of the country were affected differently, right? So in the Northeast, where I'm located, we were hit early on, and and it's funny because I can show you a graph where we're trucking along, and then there's like a nosedive that just comes straight off in April of 2020, like it just stopped. Right. But then you look at the other parts of the country, and I can tell you, I know some PTs that I've met at PPS, that I've met at the APTA seminars, and they were like, 2020 was our best year ever. They were like, we killed it this year and they were in the Midwest or in the South, and they were like, we did so good because everyone had to stay home for work. And then PT was allowed to stay open, and patients were actually showing up because it was something to do. So they were having the best year ever, right? So it was a night and day switch. So yeah, it was utterly crazy. We, of course, had it very different. We shut down. I have some clinics in the suburbs as well. The clinics in the suburbs did well. The clinics in the city were completely shut down.
And you're where again?
It was New York City and New Jersey.
Yeah.
So the clinics in New Jersey did well because they're technically suburbs, right? So it's people were home and they were like, hey, I have nothing else to do. I'm going to go to PT today, right? But New York City, of course, was completely ghost town. Like I could drive from my house to my office in Manhattan and park on the street, which you're not allowed to do, obviously, if you've ever been to New York City. You're just not allowed to do that. But there was no one there to stop you, right? Cops didn't really care about saying, I'm going to give you a ticket. They're like, hey, there's a car on the street, right? So it was a very eerie feeling back then. But I can tell you, right or wrong, I think we all learned a lot from it, right? That's kind of the big takeaway. I think clinics that are in the Midwest that were able to deal with it later on, where they had some more information, and then when they got hit with COVID, they had some more information. They were able to tackle it. The ones that were prepared. And of course, the clinics in the West and the clinics in the East, they were handling it different as well. So I think right or wrong, I think we've all learned something from it. And I think coming out of it is where, the majority of clinics are looking at what can we do now to get better, right? And I think that's ultimately where I led to, into my next stage. And
what is that trend that you're seeing that owners are seeing? What can I do now to get better? Hopefully, owners are learning from the experience and doing something different in terms of how they manage and administer their practices. What are you seeing that owners are looking forward, or what are they looking to change?
Here's a couple of ways to answer this question, because recently I was on a podcast for the non-clinical PT. And the reason I'm bringing this up, and not to plug them, but just to say something about this, is something very interesting that I saw. Because of the pandemic, and most of the PTs were laid off. I can tell you the bigger chains, well, not hospitals basically, but the bigger chains, the practices, they laid off hundreds and thousands of PTs across the country, right? Because they were like, hey, listen, we don't have the volume, we're going to have to lay you off. Those PTs got disgruntled, right? They were like, hey, I'm not as valuable as I thought I was, or I can be replaced very easily, right? So that's one thing that I saw. But those PTs started thinking, what else can I do, right? With my knowledge base, with my time, with all the years of school, what else can I do? This was super interesting being on that podcast because I was learning as much as being interviewed, right? I was just like, wow, I'm learning a ton from this. So that's one of the things I saw. I saw a lot of people leave the profession, right? They're leaving the profession, or they're now actively not looking for a clinical job. If they're in a clinical job, and I think the study's been out already, I just read this recently, 50% are actually, looking to switch. 30% are actively working, but the other 20% are already gone, so not coming back. So it's 50%. That's a staggering number of employees just not there right now. And it's one of those things that we're like, that's something as owners we have to take very seriously. So what can we do to attract staff? What can we do to keep that staff, right? And it's just the state of the industry where we are, right? And we've been saying it for years, and I don't want to beat a broken drum at this point about decreasing reimbursements and, the squeeze by the insurance companies. We know that's been happening. That's happening for the last 15 years that I've owned the practice, right? It's been going on every year. They're like, hey, it's a little bit more. And I think the pandemic sped that up in some aspects where some people were like, it's okay. And I think what happened was, and this is just my own theory on this, I think the payments for COVID were so high, the health insurance companies now have to figure out, okay, we spent all that money on COVID, where else can we save, right? Because they're still a business at the end of the day. So they're trying to look at their balance sheet and say, okay, where can we cut some costs at this point? And I think this is what is being translated down to us now as just practice owners and PTs.
Yeah, since you brought it up, I think there's two things that owners are really looking to do differently. And some of it out of necessity, right? But some of it because they learned their lessons. Well, number one, like you said, recruiting for PTs in general, they have to get better at recruiting PTs. It used to be they'd throw something up on, it used to be Craigslist, now it's Indeed or whatever, ZipRecruiter. They'd throw an ad and they'd get a few resumes and they'd go from there, right? Now they have to be active agents if they're going to recruit top people. And probably because, like you said, people are leaving the industry, right? Or they're looking for something better. They want a better work-life balance, if you will. They want something different. They want an owner that's more amenable. Maybe benefits is more important for them. So actively recruiting as an owner is something that we haven't had to do much of before, and actually learn how to recruit. And then the second thing is you've got to find a way to attract patients without relying on the physician referral. And that's something that I think it's for the pandemic has just simply forced the hand of PTs to consider their marketing and their efforts to get patients in the door and to keep them engaged. It used to be, you would do some lunches, we'd see some doctors, send out some newsletters, maybe promote the high school basketball team, you name it. Now they're actively looking at Facebook and how to utilize social media, how to blog or podcast or you name it to get their name and brand out there. And so we're seeing a different version of marketing than we did prior to the pandemic. And it's simply because they've been forced their hands. And speaking of that, is that what led you to what you're doing now?
It's a great leadway because look, as someone like myself who's located in New York City, and I was just looking around and saying, okay, where you're stuck at home, there was nothing we can really do. And obviously the mandate was changed probably 2 months later where they were like, PT is now what was the wording? I think
essential.
It was essential. It was an essential service, right? Yeah. But then, they said in the beginning it was like only essential workers. And then we were like, well, do we fall under essential? And there was no guidelines. So we really didn't know. But in that time frame, I started thinking, I'm like, what's the next thing that will happen, right? So I started looking, and I had plenty of time, obviously, and like most people, we had plenty of time to hang on the computer and look at things. But a good friend of mine who was in the industry years ago, but now is in software, showed me a lot of stuff of what they're doing with 3D movement or 3D capture and saying, hey, this is what's happening. So I got super interested and I said, this is really interesting. And they were using this technology in Europe, and he's saying we use this for mostly corporations. Like corporations are using it because they want to see, obviously, how healthy their employees are, or if there's an injury coming up, or can we lower the insurance costs if we show that our employees are healthy. Yeah, are healthier, right? So it was one of those things. And, I approached him and said, hey, listen, why aren't you in the US with this? And he goes, no reason, just never got to that point. So I said, okay, it's something you want to get to. I would love to spearhead the US. I would love to, take a crack at this and say, how can we bring this? But my only condition was I'd love to bring it to the clinicians first, because you need a clinician to basically say, hey, this is the medical sound advice. This is what we see. This is what our job is based on. We look at movement. As physical therapists, we are specialists in movement. So it was like an easy marriage of two great concepts. And I was like, you know what? I think it's a great tool. How do we bring this to the US? That was stage one. Stage two, I had to really figure out, how do we use this in the clinics? How do we use this? How do we introduce it to providers? How do we introduce it just to our patients? So, the good news is I had a testing ground. I had a couple of clinics that I own myself. So I said, hey, let's test it out in my own clinics. But then I had to come up with, the marketing. I had to come up with the scripting. I had to come up with every aspect of it to say, okay. And even then, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Even my own PTs had a hard time adopting this, because they were like, Joe, when do I add this in? Do I do it before the eval? Do I do it after the eval? Do I do it the next day? Do you just want to do it one time, like as a promo? Like, what are we doing here? That was the way we got to doing the 3D movement scans. It's one of those things, and I'll be happy to explain more about it. But
yeah, tell us a little bit about what it is what the software is, what it does for an owner, especially for what it does for a patient and a PT.
Yes. So it's a portable device. It's a portable 3D movement scan. It's basically, it can be done in the clinic. It can be done in any room. Basically, you can do it in a gym. You can do it in a hospital. You can do it anywhere you want. It's portable.
You can do it at a community event, like taking it to a booth.
Yep, you can do it to a booth. I've done trade shows already, and I'll explain my conversion at a trade show, which was amazing. We do trade shows. So there's so many things with so many applications of where you can do it. And the best part about it is it's completed in under 10 minutes. So basically, this scan, all it does is it looks at a patient. It takes them through 6 movements or 6 exercises, basically, right?
Okay.
And it gets a full picture of the human body going through movement. So a lot of the scans, if you look at a lot of the posture scans that are out there, it's all static. The person's not moving, and then it's based on weight and weight shift and all that kind of stuff, but the person's not moving. So the data is a little bit like, we don't really know. But now what's different with this is we're actually looking at the actual movement. So when we look at somebody's squat, we're tracking the squat, right? We're seeing the shifts. And to be honest with you, look, the human eye is only so good. You and I, if you're trained in FMS and if you've been practicing as many years as we have, we're going to say, hey, look, we see it on a patient. We know we're like, hey, look, that knee's dropping in a little bit. But let's be honest. How many patients have we said this to that they look at it and say, yeah, I think I see it, because then we see it and we think it's very obvious. But we've seen it. They don't have the eye for it. But what's great about this is the 3D camera basically picks up from every angle. And I got to tell you, the science is way over my head on this, but I can tell you it's so cool that you can move the avatar around and you can look at it from different angles and say, wow, look at that from a side, bottom, top to bottom. And look, if you and I are looking at somebody, we're looking at them straight on. The camera is catching from the top to bottom to top, left, right. And I'm like, look, the human eye just can't do this. And I'm like, this is absolutely amazing. So it's something that's used very quickly. Yeah. It's where I personally believe it is going to be. It's the technology that's disrupting, PT in the future. But that future is like now, right? Because, like I said earlier, not earlier. I guess I was telling somebody earlier on the phone. I'm like, this is the first AI technology in physical therapy, right? Because it's gathering so much data. Because it's looking at somebody in New York doing a squat, and then it looks at somebody all the way in Texas doing a squat, and then they look at that age group, and it's taking all that data and it's starting to say like, okay, look, this person weighs this much, this person walks to work every day, this person drives to work every day. Now it's calculating everything, right? And it starts kicking out these reports that you, as a PT, we can read it, and we train everyone that we go to, we train them to read the report. There's a shorter version and there's a much longer version. The shorter version is cool because that's what the patient gets. It's a one pager, gives them the, hey, red is bad, green is good kind of stuff, which to be honest, most of my PTs are reading as well, because they're like, listen, I'm not going to read that 8-page report. Just give me the one pager and I'll explain it. And look, it's one of those things that you say, wow, the patient themselves, the adoption that we've seen in the last year, we've been using it for about a year now. the adoption of a patient to their plan of care or to pay their deductible or whatever it is has been at an all-time high because they just actually see the avatar, right? It's no longer me telling them that, hey, by the way, hey, Janice, your knee is dropping in when you do a squat. It's no longer, Joe, the PT saying it. Now it's, the computer, the camera itself telling, hey, listen, this is what's happening to you. When you're dropping, when you come down, your knee is going in, that red arrow means it's bad. It could be predictive of a meniscus tear. It could be predictive of possible ACL injury. Right? And the patient looks at that and goes, wow, that's pretty bad. How do I fix that? Right? And that's the most common words we get out of a patient's mouth at this point. How do we fix it? And that's music to our ears, right? Because that's what we do with specialists.
Yeah, that's the beauty also of diagnostic ultrasound. And I know those providers that are using diagnostic ultrasound, MSKUS, in their practices, when they can get an objective picture. It's the beauty of X-rays and MRIs. And I think it's a human nature to see something objective and not have to rely on someone's eyes or opinion, if you will. Then you can really buy into that. Like, oh, there's a problem right there. I see it. That's it. What do I need to do to fix it? Right? That's the phrase that usually comes up. And so I can definitely understand how providing this kind of movement assessment, diagnostics of movement, if you will, through a 3D scan can definitely improve buy-in and engagement with the patient to their plan of care. Considering that, do you see particular statistics that have changed significantly because of this? Can you name any?
Yeah, so once the scan is done, what we're also seeing, and we'll give you a very simple one, right? And this is, we've seen over and over again, because it basically looks at, it's getting the posture done, it does muscle imbalances, and then there's the AI is predictive of future injuries, right? Okay. So those are three main features when we explain to a patient or explain to another provider, a physician, we say, these are the main things we're looking at. But let's tackle the posture first, because this is the easiest one, and we're seeing it over and over again. So just say you have a 16-year-old kid that comes in. Kid's a football player, super in great shape, coming in probably for a shoulder or a knee, and say, okay, let's scan you, let's see where you're at, and see how that knee's doing, and how anything else that we can find. Scan the kid, goes with that, and a 16-year-old, physically nothing really wrong with them, probably has a tweak somewhere. Does a scan completely perfect, gets done in 10 minutes. We're like, all right, great, let's read the report. We look at the report and we see the neck, the neck's like 16 degrees forward with an 8-degree tilt. When you're looking at that, you're like, oh my God. And again, 16 degrees, they say anything over 2 degrees will trigger headaches and will trigger, dizziness and stuff like that. So now you're saying, oh wow, this kid's at 16 degrees. And we're like, why is your head so far forward? Why is it tilted so far down? And then you look at this kid when he's on the table getting iced, and you see him like this the entire time, right? Because he's looking at his phone. Yeah, and you see that's an entire generation. Yeah. And that's all of us too. But that same kid, who's coming in for his knee, would probably only stay for 3 or 4 visits because he's going to say, hey, Mom, I feel good. I'm not going to come anymore. Now we go back to Mom and say, hey, listen, Mrs. Jones, young Jimmy's his knee's going to feel great, but we want to address his neck. And that posture, that looks really bad. We want to make sure we fix that. We can concentrate on the knee first, or we can we can make sure we take care of that. But we also want to make sure that we get on the, get this neck fixed as well. And guess what? Little Jimmy there is saying, hey, I don't want to have a hump in my back. How do I fix that? This is horrible, right? They're like, I didn't know I was that bad. And you're like, yeah, because, you don't see yourself from the side. Now, you don't see how far your head is forward, right? So you don't see that. And it's a huge thing we're catching as well. But that simple thing for patient compliance has been one of the, that they actually stay for their visits. So if a PT goes, hey, listen, this is going to take me 6 weeks, this is going to take me 4 weeks before we do a rescan, that patient's actually staying for the entire length of stay. So now your patient's actually getting better. Instead of them saying, I feel a little better, I'm going to drop off because the copay is too high. Now they're actually staying for the entire length of the visit. They get better, right? And then they say, hey, look, it's working. Like, hey, look, I fixed my posture. I fixed my knee. And then you're grabbing all other diagnoses. You're grabbing other things that you can work with that client. So this has been the big difference that we've seen, and we've, in the clinics that we've partnered with, that are using the scanner, we're seeing the simple fact that muscle imbalances, patients see that and they're like, hey, how do I fix it? And it's usually away from the spot of injury or surgery or whatever it may be. They may be coming in for a low back issue, but we catch a shoulder issue. They may be coming in for a ankle issue, and then we catch a knee issue, right? And they're not even aware of it. Or do they tell the PT that they have these other issues, right? They come in and obviously look, when I used to treat, I remember, somebody would come in with plantar fasciitis, and I would be treating them, 5-6 sessions in before I find out that they had a hip injury 2 years ago on the other side. And I'm like, well, that might be a reason you ended up with the plantar fasciitis. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that? I didn't think it was important. And that's 6 sessions already in. So it's one of those things that we're catching it literally the day of the evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And so I'm assuming maybe in your own clinics, are you seeing better engagement statistics, whether it's episodes per plan of care or reactivation of patients, or maybe a minimized cancellation rate or frequency per week is improved, or what are there certain engagement statistics that you're seeing are improving?
All of that, but I'm gonna take one by one, right? So the retention number, or the number we track to see how long a patient stays with us.
Sure.
Now, across the country, I remember PPS did a study. It came back, the number was 8, right? We were no better. We were only at 9, to be honest with you. We started implementing the scanner and we said, okay, look, this is the plan of care. We moved that number from 9 to 16 in 1 month. Because now the patient actually staying, they were actually staying, right? Because we would say, hey, your rescan is going to be in 6 weeks. So day 1, and we're going to rescan you in 6 weeks. 3 times a week, 2 times a week, whatever they kind of molded it out to. But they went from 9 sessions to 16 sessions. That's 7 extra sessions that go to profit automatically, right? Because that just goes to the bottom line. You're not doing any more marketing for that person. You're just keeping that person. So that was a huge one. Reactivation. I mean, reactivation has been something. Obviously, this is a marketing thing that I've been, telling everyone for my entire career, like, hey guys, this is the easiest form of marketing you can do. Speak to your old patients, get them back in. It's very easy. Lifetime value increases when you can get those patients back in. That might be a postcard, it might be Facebook, whatever marketing tactic you can think of to reactivate your old patient. This is something different, right? Because now we're just saying, hey, look, we have something different for you to come experience. It's 10 minutes. Come on in, right? It's a 10-minute 3D movement scan. Because there's a couple of reasons. Because it's so new, patients that already know, like, and trust you are like, hey, this is cool. You guys are doing something really brand new. I want to come in. So you have that population that comes in.
That's cool.
Then you have the population that comes in and goes, you know what? Yeah, I want to see what this is all about. I've heard from, Mary or John or whoever, I want to check this out, right? And then they just look, and some people just out of the blue, it has nothing to do with the reactivation. Maybe the postcard went to the wrong house. They like, hey, I got this random postcard in the mail, and they show up. And I've never seen conversion like this before because, and look, no matter how many years I've done marketing, it's always about the messaging, right? And, PT, let's be honest, PT is not sexy. It's not something I'm like, hey, we're going to bring in a bunch of people because they come in for a pain point, right? So this is different. I'm not talking about a pain point. We're talking about, we're talking about real healthcare. We're talking about avoiding being injured. We're talking about predicting injury. So it's that concept of healthcare versus sick care. And people that understand that, you get a whole other group of people that come in on that reactivation campaign. So that's been huge for us. And lastly, look, the last part we talk about with everyone is the referral numbers. Now, word of mouth referral is every PT clinic. I think every PT clinic touts on how great they are word of mouth referral. I'm not a big fan of word of mouth referral. I tell patients, I'm like, when I tell my colleagues, I'm like, hey guys, word of mouth is good. You should get that automatically, but we should put some, marketing behind it. It'll make it much better.
For sure.
We changed that without scripting. I said, let's rely on the word of mouth, because once we scan somebody, and we literally do this every day. My staff has this scripting perfectly down at this point. They literally scan somebody and then they say, hey, would your husband or your wife or your son want to get scanned as well? We can scan them later, just 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it works like a charm because people just say, what, my husband would love this. Can you get him in later? We're like, yeah, it's just 10 minutes. It's not an appointment. We don't need a whole 30 minutes or an hour for that person. Just 10 minutes. And yeah, and look, and it's not even the PT doing the scan. It's your tech. It's your admin. It's anyone else that's in the clinic that can just say, hey, look, I'll set them up for the scan. And this is how we level the authority of the PT. Just like the MRI, Just like the MRI, we don't say you're going to, the tech's not reading the scan. It's like, hey, the doctor will read your scan on your next visit. So the report is completed. Nice. The tech, the admin, the aide, they'll say, hey, listen, the PT or the doctor is going to read this report for you and get back to you. So what happens? Mrs. Jones is there. Like, hey, look, I got your husband's results. Really want to go over the stuff with him. Can I give him a call? And absolutely, give him a call. Or I'm going to make him come in to pick me up today. And just like that, we went from one patient to two patients automatically. Right. So it's just like, it's actually decreased my marketing costs because I'm like, well, I'm not spending as much anymore because I'm pulling in a family member. I'm pulling in a coworker almost immediately because they see it, they like it, they see the results for themselves, and then they start thinking immediately like, well, who could benefit? And it's always an immediate family member or a son, daughter, somebody that's playing a sport. So right away we catch. Yeah.
You can see a lot of applications to it, not just, you talked a lot about engagement and getting word of mouth referrals, getting past patients to come in. Hey, check it out, free assessment. And I want to talk about that a little bit, whether it's free or you might recommend charging a little bit for it. Easily see this, taking something like this to a gym, especially like a CrossFit box. I think they would eat it up alive, right? Or take it to the trade shows like you're talking about, whatever booth you might have to give free movement assessments would be great instead of using the massage table or the massage chair or whatever the PTs do, right?
So Nathan, and you and I think alike. So it's amazing because everything you said we've done already, and I'm going to give you some stats on this.
Oh, cool.
Let me start with the trade show first because this one I've never seen it before. And when I say trade show, you can think of a health fair.
Yeah,
the same thing. So we did a convention. It was like the national, statewide teachers convention here in New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
So they had about 1,200 to 1,500 teachers there. It was a massive convention center. We had a tiny little booth next to 3 other PT practices and a podiatrist, right? The other PTs were doing massages. And one PT was just had a bunch of stuff on the table and wasn't just handing stuff out, right? And that person was just like, listen, this is more about branding. I'm not going to do anything. They're going to grab some stuff off the table and that's it. The other 2 PTs were just working, busting their butts, giving out massages to everybody.
Their thumbs were going crazy.
Oh my God. And don't get me wrong. They had a line, but their PTs were destroyed. Like, I mean, by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because it was a lot of humans. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they were just exhausted. Like, and they were like, they took a 2-hour lunch. They were just like, this is done. We decided we were just scanning people. So I had 2 people there with me. One person was there just to explain it to people, but we were just getting them in and we were just scanning them. We scanned 93 teachers in 2 days. Right? Wow. So remember, these are just 10-minute scans and we were just cranking them out. It was pretty fast. And then we would email them the results. Some people, since we had a little bit of time, we would kind of explain to them really quick, hey, these are the things that we found. Here's the closest clinic to you. Or if you're interested in virtual PT, we can do virtual PT if you don't live close by. So we gave them a couple of different options. We converted 3 out of 4 of those patients, those leads, those prospects, into patients. And again, I've never seen conversion like this in my life because the average conversion on something like this is like less than 2%.
Yeah.
But we were converting at 75% because those people were seeing something and they were like, hey, how do I fix this? It's the most common line. How do I fix this? And we're like, well, it'll take you a couple of sessions. And some didn't have anything too bad. A lot of postural issues, a ton of knee issues. So we had knee and posture, all day. So we were saying the same thing over and over again. Like, hey, look, we can fix this with PT. You can fix this with PT. A lot of it could be done virtually. And we signed up a ton virtually. And again, it was just like so many people were added from one event. It was a 2-day event, but we added a ton of people.
That's great.
So that was the big win. CrossFit, the box, I mean, amazing. So we teamed up with the local CrossFit. They had a big charity event going on. Mm-hmm. We went in, we just took a corner of it. And again, first we had, it was slow at first, but then we started getting the people started coming over to us. First, it was the trainers themselves wanted to check themselves out. So they got themselves checked out and they started seeing a lot of muscle imbalances. Now, their posture was great, but the muscle imbalances were extreme. So the natural question is like, all right, I know how should I fix this? And there's a knowledge base that they already have, but what they didn't understand is what exact movement they should be doing to fix it. So it's great with the software that we provide. We provide 3 apps, basically. One's a scanning app. One's basically what we call the lab, where you can actually see the scan and go through it in detail. And lastly, there is something called the Pro, where it gives you the exercise to help solve the issues, right? So you might give you a PT that's brand new, and you're like, hey, look, I don't know how to fix, a cervical issue. Or, you know what, I'm a PT that's brand new, or a personal trainer that's brand new, and I don't know how to fix knee valgus. Am I fixing the opposite glute? Am I fixing the foot? What am I doing? But there's exercises already loaded up in there that make it a little bit easier. And again, you have your own treatment, but now you have the ability to say, well, let me get some more ideas. So we had a lot of gyms that day that decided to kind of sign up with us, because they were like, hey, the fact that you give us something to do elevates our standard. Because as a personal trainer or a CrossFit expert, they're like, hey, you're giving us some ideas on what exercises we should be able to do. And again, I'll be honest with you, they're better at selling than PT. So they were selling, because you asked me earlier, they're selling the scan itself. The PTs that we use, we just say, hey, if you want to charge a copay, charge a copay. We have one PT that charges up to $150 just for the scan itself.
Just for the scan.
To be honest, we literally give it away for free, because we know we're getting them in as a patient. It's been working so well at this point that when somebody refers their husband or wife to come in, we don't even charge them a copay. We're like, hey, come on in, let's just scan you and see what's up. And it's so fluid to us that we know we can convert them, that, I'm hesitant to say we're batting 100 at this time, but we're probably in the high 90s at this rate, because we're doing really well at those conversions, because they're seeing it, and then right away they're doing something with it.
Yeah. When you make changes like this, and it's something that you had to work through in your own clinics, and I'm sure you're seeing it as you're implementing into other clinics, where's the sticking point? Because like we talked about before we pushed record, it's not easy for many PTs to change their protocols. Like, they're kind of stuck in a system. This is how I do it. So I'm wondering if that's a sticking point sometime into implementing this into a clinic that has multiple PTs.
Great question, Nathan. And I literally, I'm going to share a story with you. We now, in the beginning, when we were basically selling the equipment, we would say, okay, look, we do a training, and we would do that training via Zoom, right? And we're like, it's easy, because it's not that difficult to train somebody. Literally in one day, we can train the entire staff. We can train the staff, the owner, everything in one day. It's not technology or a tool that takes 2 years to learn, or a year to learn, or 3 months. It's one day. We're going to show you one day how to use it, how to implement it. And then we have follow-ups, weekly follow-ups, and it switches over to a monthly follow-up. But here's the main thing that we saw from those Zooms. We realized that the biggest challenge was that they were unable to adopt it fast enough. Because the biggest thing that PTs complain about, or not, I don't want to say complain, but have an issue with, is that they look at it as, oh man, I have one more thing to do now besides my notes.
Yeah, totally.
Besides to do my eval. I don't even have time in my eval to do this. You want me to do this now? Yeah, so they get upset. So we went in and we said, okay, look, let's change from the Zoom to the in-person. Because I want them to see me in person with my CO with me. We're both PTs. We're not sales reps. We're not some industry higher up or anything like that. We're just like you. We work in clinics. I dare to say I've worked in clinics worse than them. Because I'm looking at their clinic, I'm like, this clinic's beautiful compared to the places I used to work at. So I tell them, I'm like, listen, I'm going to show you exactly how we're using it in our own clinics and how I would use it as a PT myself. So that's how we start every training. So we come in and we show them, like, this is exactly how we use it. And that's how you're going to get the best results out of it. But we pull in everybody. We pull in the admins, we pull the aides, the techs, they have OTs, whoever they have, we're pulling everybody, and we train everybody and say, hey, listen, this should be something that's dynamic, that if one person's busy, the other person could jump in. It's very easy to do. You press a button, you guide your patient through. There might be some issues, make sure it's safe for the patient. So you're just checking some basic things. And then we give them the money maker, what I call it, to the owners. The money maker is the scripting. Now, exactly what you say, right after it, what you say when you're reading it, because when you're reading that scan is so important, and how you read that scan to the patient, because you don't want to scare them. And look, when you see a sheet come out with all red on it, you don't want to scare the patient and say, hey, look, there's all these issues this poor guy has. You want to kind of break it to him gently and say, hey, let's concentrate on this one thing. Let's concentrate on this. That is number 2. And let's get going with that. And you know what? The patient appreciates it. And the patient's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's start with my back first. And then we can tackle all the other things that are wrong with me, right? But a PT that doesn't know that, is going to scare that patient away, because the patient's going to be like, well, I'm just broken. I'm out of here. You can't fix me. So that's been huge, because, look, I understand the PT's point of view. And I say to them, I say, I get it. You're busy. You have evals, you have patients all day long. But that's why what's great about this is when you have an aide, if you don't use aides, great. You can use your admin who has 2 minutes, will get up, scan somebody, right? And guess what? He or she might want to get up from sitting down all day and say, hey, look, I would love to scan and talk to this person for a little bit. And I might learn more about them, right? So there's so many different ways, and every clinic's different. I mean, we've been to about 35 clinics so far. Every clinic is different. There is some that are just so busy that we're like, hey, you don't even have time to scan. Maybe this is not the right fit for you. And they're like, yeah, let's put it on a new clinic where it's just starting up. Let's build this clinic up. Or then we look at, hey, this is a workers' comp clinic. How will this help you? Or this is a personal injury clinic. How will it help you, right? So we look at each clinic, every practice a little differently. We say what best practices are. And we also say, look, is this the right fit for you? We've had one clinic, and I share this with you, where the clinic was only personal injury, but the attorneys wouldn't use the report. So, I told them, I said, look, I know how much you love this. I know how much you love AI and you want to implement this, but this is not the best device for your clinic. And again, I'm looking out for them. I said, look, we don't need the sale. I'm telling you right now, the point here is this is not something that's going to work for you, because if the attorney's telling you they're not going to use it, then it's if they're not using that data, if they're not using the report, and your client's coming in, it's great for your client, but do you really need it? So that PT held off. So, hey, I'm going to hold off for a little bit and see, but they really liked it because they were getting a lot more information, and it helped the PT to document better because it kicked out a great way. It was looking at everything. Yeah, it gives you the report. So, to be honest, the report has a lot of wording in there. So if you're just cutting and pasting from the report, it makes life a little bit easier. So, but again, we caution certain therapists like, hey, this will work. This is not going to work. Yeah. But the regular outpatient PT and chiros, to be honest with you, have been using this, and it's been very successful so far for everyone.
Is it? And I don't know the regulations too well, but is it billable as a functional assessment? Can you charge a unit for it?
You can bill it. I mean, we all know if you get paid for something like that, it's very low. You have a better chance of just charging a copay for it and collecting that $20 or $30 than waiting for that one code to go by. Or you just roll it into your evaluation and say, this is part of my evaluation.
Yeah.
Look, every PT owner that's listening, this is for the owners mainly, because I'm going to tell you, when it's rolled into the evaluation, it's bringing up the value of what you're delivering. So if you're in network and that patient says, hey, look, you do something different than the PT down the street, they'll stay with you. If you do this versus a hospital, with a big hospital chain that's in the Midwest, they compete against the giant hospital chains, which is different, in some parts of the country. So the fact that the big hospital doesn't have this and you have this, you're going to get a lot more patients that want this. They might say, hey, look, this is the reason I'm staying with you, right? And that's the big takeaway, because look, you can't fight a doctor that's going to say, hey, I have to only send to the hospital, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But what you can do is you can advertise this, and patients will just come to you directly. And on top of that, we've gone to the physicians themselves. And look, we all know this is PTs. For years, we had to go to the physicians. This is the first time in our career that the physicians are coming to us, because this is something so new and so exciting that they're coming to us to look at it themselves, check it out. And then they say, wow, this is great. Because cool. I don't know how many surgeons that aren't into some type of technology or AI. They're all into it. So they love this stuff, and they're like, this is very different. And even if they're mandated to send to the hospital themselves, they're looking at different ways of working together or trying to figure out how you can bring the scanner to the hospital, right? So you get there's so many ways you can win on this, right? And that's the takeaway, from this.
Yeah. Are there certain owners that you found as you're implementing it that are in better situations than others to make this successful? Like the most successful owners that are working with you at this time, do you see a trend as to where they are in their ownership journey in terms of maybe treating full-time versus not, or having a leadership team in place or not? Or are there certain characteristics about owners that have made some more successful than others?
And I'm going to tell you this, it's probably not what you think. It's the owners that are actually still treating. And if they're treating full-time or if they're treating part-time, these are the ones that have made this the most successful. And for number one reason is they see that they implement it before their staff is implementing it. They champion their staff to use it. And I tell you, in 30 days, the entire staff is using it. But the clinics that have the owner involved, But, hands on the ground, involved, that's there all the time, it makes a huge difference. There's a flip side to this, though. We have met now clinics where the owner's not that involved, or, they've abdicated more than delegated, I would say, to a clinic director. Those clinics are not as successful with it because the clinic director doesn't know all aspects of the business. They understand the treatment side of it very well. They maybe understand the billing side really well, maybe, but they don't understand all the other circles in the business or all the other factors that affect the day-to-day, right? So it's a big thing that I've been seeing now in some clinics where some owners have kind of delegated to a clinic director, but the one that's the most successful, the owners that are very hands-on, involved in it, because at least for 30 days, if you get this up and running for 30 days and your staff adopts it, you'll be surprised at how it becomes second nature for them to use it, right? But I can tell you the ones that are not really doing well with it are probably the ones that are just like, you know what, here's this new device or here's this new toy, let me drop it in the clinic and you guys take care of it and, I'm going to do something else. And those clinic owners, I say the same thing to them when I was doing the marketing and consulting. I said, guys, I don't know your clinic as well as you know your clinic. Again, I'm a PT, you're a PT. I can write great ads for you. I can write great marketing for you, but it's not in your voice. So if you don't know your own clinic or if you don't participate in this, we will never be able to be as successful as the owners that I work with that have their own voice, have their own way of presenting their clinic. And those are the ones from years past, I can tell you that we made tons of money with because they were the ones that got so many patients coming in because it was in their voice. I was just a guide. I just kind of guided them in the right direction. Said, hey, let's do a little bit more of this. Let's look at this. I was able to look at the data. Yeah. Very different, right? So I think it's the same exact thing.
What I can see there is inherently those owners that are still treating full-time or part-time, they haven't codified it, but they have a naturally innate implementation program in that I'm going to figure this out myself first and see how it works and see what the benefits are and how my patients react and respond. And then it's easy for me then to train the other PTs and get it ingrained and implemented. Whereas those owners who are not there or not as present, they need to be a little bit more intentional about the implementation program and how it's going to be rolled out so that it does, to use a farmer's vernacular, so the water gets to the end of the row, right? And so they need to be a little bit more intentional. They need to probably get some buy-in from the lead PT or the clinic director, and maybe they start small. I mean, have you seen some owners do that where they start with, okay, only Joe's patients are going to get this right now so we can really work out the kinks. And then once Joe gets it really grooved in, then we're going to roll it out to the rest of the clinics and get some training so to learn the words to use and how to implement it into the program and make it part of our protocols on a seamless basis. Have you seen owners do that?
Well, we've seen the multi-clinic owners, the way they do it now is they start in one clinic or even two clinics. So they'll buy one unit and they'll share it between two clinics. Yeah, so I've seen that. They haven't narrowed it down to per PT, but say if they have 5 locations or 4 locations, they say, Joe, you know what? I want to test it out in this one location. So we say, okay, the ones that we always shock are the ones that already have like one clinic and it's super busy. Then they start the second clinic and it's not really busy. So I tell them, they're like, I'm going to put in my busy clinic. I said, how about this? Let's put in the slow clinic. I said, let's start it in the slow clinic. Give it 30 days, right? Let's have that PT use it because he's a little slower. He'll be able to spend more time. But guess what happens? He's going to build such a following because the new clinic is now separate. The differentiation factor is so different that they're pulling in patients left and right in this new area, right? And the new doctors that they have to meet. Now the doctors are coming in, checking out this new clinic. It's brand new and say, hey, this is the new PT in the area. I would love to check this out. Oh, you have this 3D movement scanner. What's this all about? So brand new, when they start a new clinic, it doesn't matter if you're on clinic number 3 or 5 or 6. When you start that clinic, you and I both know it takes a little bit to get it up and running, right? It's like you have to crank that wheel a bit, right? And we don't see a return on investment for probably about 18 months or so, but this is now speeding up the process because what's happening? You're getting more patients into the funnel, into the practice way earlier than you would do in a traditional practice. And, I'm not there yet. I'm testing it out in 2 clinics right now, but I want to do a study of 2 clinics that start at the same time, one without it, one with it, and just see like, hey, what's the growth? And then we know if we run it for 18 months or even less, hey, what's the growth rate of it? And that would be great to see. So that might be in the next 6 months. Next 6 months or so, I'm going to put something like that together in my presentation. But what's great about this is everyone's very open. A lot of my partners are very open with their data and with their results. Again, they just look at it, and I tell everybody, I'm like, I know we're PTs and I know we're in medical, and we want to look at the science behind it. But if we remove all of that and just look at it as a way that, hey, without all the science, and the patients just love it, they stick to their plan of care, and you're getting a lot more people to come in. If we look at the very basic concept of it, and you get to do what you're good at, which is being a PT, guess what happens? They get better, right? So I said, cut all the other layers off. Don't overthink this. And I know PTs, we overthink at times. But just don't overthink and keep it very simple. What do we do best? We get people to move. This is just being able to say, all right, I can shorten your evaluation. Your eval is now much shorter than it was before in the old days, and now this is where I see it going. And that's one of the things that I think I brought up in the beginning, especially during COVID. I realized if you don't really have all the people coming into a clinic, and in the future you're going to have less and less because they're going to be working from home, or they're going to be traveling, or they don't have to come to the office, or whatever it is. How can we deliver that care to them? And again, I'm going to be very honest. This technology is only going to get better. It's going to get to the point where it will get to your phone, and you'll be able to do it from your phone. It's not there yet because the camera in your phone is just not there yet.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. 2 years, 3. I mean, for God's sake, the camera in your phone is better than the camera I bought like 3 years ago, right? So it's I see it happening, and that's why I want to tell PTs, I'm like, you want to jump on it earlier than later, because this is something where if you get adoption with your staff now, that's one thing, right? But if they understand how to use this, as technology increases, and it's going to be that way for a patient to do it from home, you also want to be the PT that's able to read these reports, really understand it, right? So for those non-clinical PTs out there that I shared with them the other night, it's the same thing. You want to be able to read these reports, learn how to use it, and that clinic owner that purchases it and brings it in will be the ones that train you. But you'll now have a reason to, stay at that job, because it's going to be something very different than what we were doing before. It's not just the same old PT, right? So it's very interesting.
Yeah, we've covered a number of great things, and thanks for your time. The thing I'm taking away, we're talking about the 3D movement scanner that you're promoting today, but also how you need to be. Let's just to look back on parts of our conversation. What are you doing now to keep your patients engaged, whether it's this 3D movement scanner or something else, right? What are you doing to implement new programs so that they stick and stay in place? And what are you doing to market to the community? Are you the massage chair? Are you the gift giver? What are you doing to promote at some of the events? How are you getting some of those past patients back in, right? And how are you looking at if you have multiple clinics, how are you looking at your slow clinics? Are you trying to do new things, and are you tracking the statistics to see if those new things make a significant difference? And so during the course of our conversation, we're talking about your 3D movement scanner and how it can disrupt physical therapy and how it is a trend towards the future. Because I agree, as cameras get better, as apps improve, people will eventually probably be able to buy some kind of package like this, right? And set it up in their house and do it themselves and get their own reports. That's probably a few years down the line, right? But what are you doing? Are you a part of the future of healthcare and physical therapy? And what are you doing so you're not staying static and regressing and doing the same old? So there's a number of things that we touched today that I hope owners take away, that it's not just about using the scanner, but it's hopefully you're considering aspects of your business that you need to improve. And this is just one way of doing that.
I think and I want to make sure I touch on this as well, Nathan, because one of the biggest questions I get right away, right? They look at it, they love the data, they love everything, and they basically just look at it and say, okay, how expensive is it? Right. And they're like, is it that expensive? Like, is it like buying the old Easton machines for like 15 grand or 20 grand or something like that? Right.
Sure.
Or whatever the Normatex that, so That's why I address it. And I give them this one answer, and I say, I think this will help you understand. I'm like, yeah, there's an expense to everything, obviously, right? But here's the thing. Some things are a cost and some things are an investment. An investment is your return, right? You're going to get a return on it. And a cost is you're not going to get that return. No. So, obviously, if you buy some TheraBand, which is the cheapest thing I can think of, it's a cost. It's a cost of doing business, right? So, that's you just throw it in there, and you look at the expensive machines. But, and I don't want to name any expensive machines, but some machines are so expensive and people buy it and it just sits in the clinic, right? It may be a treadmill, it may be a water tank or whatever, oxygen tank, name it. It's been out there and it just sits there and it's just not used as much. Right. Mm-hmm. And that I still classify as a cost. People try to challenge me and say that's an investment. I'm like, but is it used on every patient? Are you getting your money back? How are you getting your money back on that? Are you getting referrals from it? Are they staying longer? Right. So I show them all of that. Yeah. And obviously when I do a presentation with somebody, I break down the money that you can make from it within the first 30 days based on the current patients you have without doing any extra marketing. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and again, I tell people all the time, I'm like, the expense or the investment is the way you look at it, but it's also what I can guarantee that you will make your money back every month on that investment, right? So again, I invite people to, do a discovery call with me, and we have a full webinar that I'm sure you've seen as well that they can walk through and they can see everything about it. But it's one of those that we just go through the walkthrough, we explain it to them, and then we say, hey, listen, this is all that I can do, and we have a guarantee on top of it. And so cool. we literally, we have a 60-day money-back guarantee because we know that if you can't make money with us in 60 days, we're in the wrong clinic, right? So we're like, hey, look, we'll give you your money back, and that's it. We'll just take the equipment back, and that's we call it even, right?
I got you.
But you look at it and say, how can you just give us money back and walk away? Because we're like, we know that it works. That's how simple it is. I know that if you use it on patients and you follow the scripting, and obviously I know the staff has to adopt it, but once that happens, it's used on everybody. Every patient that walks in that front door, you will use it on.
Have you found those clinics that do use FMS a lot are accepting this more, or are they more hesitant? Have you come up against that?
That is a great question. And not to knock the clinician. The older the clinician is, and I would say around my age, they still feel like they can do it themselves. They don't need it. Right? They're like, but I can do this. Why do I need a computer doing it when I can do it? And I'll be honest, it's really, from what we've seen, it's just an age thing. The older the person is, they're just like, I can do it myself. And less PTs and more personal trainers. Oh. So it's been a very interesting thing. Every PT I've spoken to looks at this and says, this is amazing. Right. And that's as soon as they stand there and you've seen the demo, as soon as you stand there, you get your whole body's just scanned. That's the aha moment, what we call it, because they all like, whoa, this is pretty cool. Right. So PT is not as much as a personal trainer that's trained in FMS, different. But I would say any clinic that's population wise, that's working with active individuals, you're going to be using this. There's a safety feature on this. Anybody over the age of 50, it will ask them to see if they're safe, if they have the balance. Now, of course, if they can't do it, there's an easy mode on it that they can try to do. Now, if they still can't do it, we tell them like, hey, don't do it. If they're not safe, just don't do it. And that's basically it.
And so how do people get a hold of you, Joe?
So look, there's a couple of different ways. LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just type in Joseph Simon on LinkedIn. Instagram as well, at Dr. Joe Simon on Instagram. And you can email me at joe@3dmdiagnostics.com. Any of those ways, if you find me, I'll be more than happy to send you a link for our demo. You can take a look at it. And after the demo, if you want to just chat on the phone and see how it'll work in your clinic, more than happy to.
Cool. Let them know Nathan sent you from the PT Owners Club, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it, Joe.
Absolutely, Nathan. Thank you so much. It's always been fun. Thank you.